Hello and welcome to another episode of The Swing. As always, it's your boy HK, and I'm joined by my co-host, that guy Owais, as we go live every Tuesday right here on SportsTrends, right here on our YouTube channel, as well as SportsTrends Facebook page, where we every week with the Swing podcast swing around the NBA world, talking about the stories that are hot, talking about the topics that are on the top of basketball fans' minds, and really what we are looking at now that we're getting into the last 7 to 8 games of the season, getting into that stretch where the final playoff seedings are coming around, and it is getting incredibly tight. It's getting to a point where we may be seeing even more late shakeup than we thought, with certain players dealing with injuries, with certain players now out for the season. It's just not been, as we've talked about a million times, a season to remember as far as health and status of players is concerned. But before we do get into that, as always, the Swing Podcast is proudly sponsored by Thrive Fantasy, which is your daily fantasy sports props app. Every evening, you can go ahead and join tournaments that you join on a nightly basis, and it's very simple. You go ahead and pick over and under on different statistical measures for different players on a given night, and if you happen to be a top 10% lineup, you will win legitimate money. And as always, a listener of the Swing, you can go ahead and enter the promo code SWING, SWING, and you will get 100% of your deposit matched up to $50 on your first deposit. So make your picks, win money with the Swing, sign up, and prop up today. Well, that guy Owais, we are, as you said, entering silly season as far as many parts of the NBA is concerned. We are entering also crunch time for a number of teams. And today we get to focus on one guy who has gone ahead and been just absolutely crunch for the Washington Wizards as they have gone ahead and gotten themselves into that play-in tournament position, unlikely to relinquish that on a great heater, have a great schedule ahead of them. Just how good has Russell Westbrook been?
I mean, can we put it into words of what Brody's been doing as of late? Like, it's been pretty crazy. I mean, if you take a look at just the amount of triple-doubles we've seen, I mean, this season, technically, the man is averaging a triple-double in itself this season. Again. But, let's start talking about the story, though, like the lead up to what's happening right now, okay? Mm-hmm. In the offseason, you and I had report cards for a lot of these teams, and we talked about how Washington we had almost as a shoo-in for the playoffs. We're like, they picked up Russell Westbrook, they've got the team, they're going to make the playoffs 100%. The season starts. Injuries happen. Thomas Bryant, one of their main centers, goes down with, I believe, a knee injury or an Achilles injury, something like that. Mm-hmm. And more and more, we notice that COVID and the practicing and everything like that is affecting each and every team in important ways. And so that chemistry that we almost felt like we would see immediately was just not there, right? Inconsistencies from everybody, even Westbrook himself. Mm-hmm. A lot of that same narrative that we've heard over and over again about Russell Westbrook being like, oh, Westbrook is a selfish player. He stat pads. He does this and that. And, Bradley Beal had to, try and carry the team to these dubs. But the dubs were not coming. Now, somewhere along the line, it's Russell Westbrook that actually takes the team to the side and has a conversation with every single one of them and asks them the important question: what is your role on this team? What is it? That changed everything. That literally changed everything, that entire outlook of how the Washington Wizards are playing. And there was almost an interview with not every single, but many of the Washington Wizards players. And they were asked about that. They're like, what did you think of that? Were you offended? What happened? They're like, no, this was brilliant. This is true leadership. Now we actually feel more comfortable than before because none of us had an idea of what was going on. So that leadership was huge. You've seen his attitude change, not against teams, but as a teammate. You have seen how much of a difference his leadership has, or at least makes, but also like who he is as a person, right? You've seen a different side of him this year. But ultimately now we talk about the stats. Yes, he's averaging triple doubles. Bradley Beal said it himself. Okay. He's like, back when we used to watch or hear about Russell, in that MVP season, that was crazy in itself. But now you actually get to witness it on a night in and night out basis. Now imagine, we're talking the Washington Wizards here. They realistically, if you take a look at the East, do not have a makeup that is, of the even mid-tier echelon. They just have those two guys and they have supporting players that, should be able to kind of chime in. They're like 5, 10, 15 points a game, but they're not talented to that level that we would see like a Toronto Raptors or, someone else like that. And Westbrook has led them, not just in, the amount of assists, rebounds. He's one of the top rebounders in the entire league right now. Top 8, and he's a guard. Imagine that. The way he's going to go grab these boards is pretty crazy. I know you're going to probably say something about that, but at the end of the day, it's still remarkable the way that he is going after those rebounds. Something Toronto has been missing. But anyway, but yeah, and the most amazing thing about all of this is actually more so how well Russell Westbrook has been doing in the clutch. Now, a lot of people had issues with him, Stephen A. and all these Proud Boys, and they always talk about how Westbrook's inefficient.
That is a banned term at this point.
Sorry, I apologize. All these really, really like casual fans, they always talk about how Westbrook is inefficient. He can't score high volume, and sure, that's true. But the impact that he makes on a game is so much bigger than any stat you can talk about. And you've seen it with the turnaround of this season, how effective he's been in the fourth. I don't know if you have any numbers to kind of back this up, but I want you to talk about, Russell Westbrook and what he's done to this team.
Yeah. Look, see, here's the thing, and it's always been interesting to me to talk about this entire time because Russell Westbrook, on a personal level, is one of my absolute favorite players in the NBA. But on the other hand, looking at it from a statistical standpoint, looking at it from all those metrics of what you look at when you are trying to actually understand just what is the positive impact that this player is bringing. That has always been something that, from a analytical standpoint, Westbrook has always had his critics on that. And frankly, it's one of those things where it's just confounding because at some point you could say it's rightfully so because stats prove it. He is an absolutely terrible jump shooter. And it's one of those things where the problem is he has just so much confidence in himself that he'll just keep shooting it. And it's one of those where there are times where it's like, there's no chance. There's no chance this is happening. And then he'll go ahead and just bomb it. And he'll be like, all right, great. So now Russell Westbrook has that. It's just one of those things where what makes Westbrook so incredibly exciting is the fact that you just don't know what you're going to get from him night in and night out. But what you will get from him is an absolute unending motor and an unending level of hustle. And at some point, and that's where I don't get into this whole like stat padding, all of that stuff, because do you realize the amount of impact that you need to be able to get the kind of numbers he gets on a regular basis? You can't just go and say, oh, it's just stat padding. No, 4 triple-double seasons. And remember, in the games that he's gotten a triple-double, these guys win nearly 76% of the games in which he has that. What was always a thing to me, and now we're seeing it more because on Washington, remember, he's being coached by the coach who was there at the start of his career, the coach who coached him throughout the prime of his career, his first MVP, his triple-double season, all of that was under Scott Brooks. And Scott Brooks has always talked about the fact that what makes Westbrook so incredible are those intangibles that he brings onto the floor. And people can disagree, all of that. It's definitely up, but he's gone ahead and said that he thinks Westbrook is the second greatest point guard of all time, behind only Magic Johnson. And obviously that's crazy high praise in many ways. He's a coach of the guy, so there's obviously going to be some level of bias in that. But his entire rationale behind what he says in that is he's not normal. That's pretty much what it comes down to. Point guards just don't do what he does. They're not built that way. And even though you might say, there are point guards that are better shooting, point guards that do this aspect of the game better, what he does across the board while also just having that incredible leadership, that incredible hustle, as we said, that combination is what makes Westbrook just such an enigma in some ways and why he's just so exciting to watch. And in this last stretch for the Washington Wizards, in which, as you said, he clinched his 4th triple-double season, which is obviously unheard of. No one else had done it outside of Oscar Robertson before he went ahead and got his first. But he is causing the rest of the Washington Wizards offense to fire at such a high cylinder at this moment. And especially, I mean, we talked about that Indiana and Washington game that just went by. In many ways, there's implications to that because those are the teams that were in that fight for, that playoff position, who is going to be getting into that play-in tournament, and especially Washington being the team that was underneath. They 100% had that marked on their calendar to go ahead and see what they can do to ensure they get that. And what they did was drop 154 points in regulation to go ahead and clinch that win. So it's just been absolutely nuts. It's yet another feather in the cap of Westbrook, who dropped a 20-rebound, 20-assist game, second time in his career. And you know who's the only other guy to ever have done that in the history of the NBA?
Magic Johnson?
No. Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh, God, no way.
Only guy in NBA history to drop a 20-rebound, 20-assist game twice in his NBA career. So, I mean, that's just hallowed territory. No matter what you want to say, there's tons and tons of incredibly athletic basketball players that come, tons and tons of incredibly talented point guards that come. But in the end, there's only one Russell Westbrook as far as his entire makeup of the game. And critics be damned. I hate that he's on the Washington Wizards because I'm like, oh man, like it hurts. It's one of my favorite players to watch on the team that I absolutely despise. TK, my brother, who's an absolute fanboy of the Washington Wizards, is obviously enjoying this moment to its fullest. But for all the faults that Russell Westbrook brings, he brings eyeballs to the TV and he brings eyeballs on the game. I am all on board with what Westbrook's doing, and it is absolutely incredible.
So, out of curiosity, do you see, and I'm sure you guys are watching right now, do you guys feel as though the Washington Wizards can, A, make the play-in? Because there is still a chance that they don't make the play-in.
Sure.
And number 2 is if they do make the play-in, do you see this team being the one that clinches that 8th spot?
Yeah, look, it's one of those things where the whole advantage / disadvantage of this play-in tournament, especially for the teams that are coming in there, is on any given night, you need to be hot enough to go ahead and beat the team to be able to get in. And that's, part of why people love things like March Madness, part of why people watch that kind of thing is because the underdog story gets given the leash to be able to go ahead and get unleashed, because you just got to win on that one night. You could be the worst team. You could be a team that is seated all the way below the top team, but on any given night, you can go ahead and pull it out. And much like we just spoke about with regards to Russell Westbrook, on any given night, if you get the Westbrook that has woken up on the right side of the bed as far as his jump shot is concerned, because the rest of it is going to come through. But it has been improving. In May, he's played 2 games so far. He's shooting 58%. Obviously, that's not going to be something that lasts. But over the last 2 months, he's gotten himself into the mid-40s as far as his field goal percentage is concerned, which is all right. Not amazing, but it's all right for what the team needs him to do. But it's all the other facilitating that's coming through. And despite what Westbrook himself can or can't do on the offensive end, he is just commanding so much attention that you can have a guy like Bradley Beal play one-on-one for most of the night because you can't take your eyes off Westbrook. He initiates the offense. He goes ahead and creates all the gravity. He's collapsing all the defense. And then he's just such an incredible passer, especially once he gets off the floor. A lot of players, you talk about that being like the worst thing you can do. When you talk about coaches, the worst thing you can do, getting off the floor, jumping up and throwing the ball away. It's like the worst thing. It's the worst possible thing you can do. But Russell Westbrook is so incredible at that he just goes ahead and does it. Much like Owais' mustache is so incredible that it's bringing back people to 2013, 14, Mitchell Johnson.
That's insane. Yeah, Mitchell Johnson. Yeah, got a lifty. I'm being. Yeah, it's funny. That's funny. Yeah, definitely appreciate the comment comparing me to an Aussie great. But yeah, one thing we have to say about Washington is when they're on a roll, they're on a roll. Right now, they're 8-2 in the last 10 games, and that last stretch has been an absolute tear for everyone, not just Westbrook, but Bradley Beal as well. He's averaging easily, like he's going for almost a scoring title this year. And we've
Yep.
talked
It's
about how
between him
he
and
is
Curry. That's it.
yeah, he is the like if you want someone, a reliable person to score 40 a game, you can definitely rely on Bradley Beal. He's established himself as that for the last like 2 to 3 seasons, and his confidence is through the roof. Now, one thing is he's not necessarily the one guy that surprisingly I found this, but he's not really been doing so well in the clutch situations as like he's shooting about 20%, which is actually pretty garbage for a guy like that. You would expect better, but that doesn't mean he's not going to contribute on the offensive end. But now we want to talk about one more person. Bradley Beal, we already know about, but on the Washington Wizards roster, they picked up Daniel Gafford. And one of the biggest changes between the Washington Wizards after bringing him in is that defensive presence that they were lacking throughout the season, right? So he's averaging about 2 blocks a game, and he's got a high motor himself, and he's just a very sound defensive big. And that really, really helps the floor. And, he's easily doing well. He's also cleaning up on the offensive end really, really well, really freaking well. And so, ultimately, that one addition, even if he's playing like really like maybe 20 minutes a game, that 20 minutes is that spark that they need in order to maintain games or like continuous, like keep the leads or, come back into a game. So I'm really impressed with Daniel Gafford's play. But I mean, a lot of it comes down to just, Westbrook really facilitating to these types of guys, right? Like getting them involved. But yeah, what a presence. And is there anything that you want to really talk about in terms of Gafford and what he's done with the Washington Wizards?
Yeah. Look, we've already spoken about how Thomas Bryant went down early in the season. That was 100% a big, big loss for the Washington Wizards, and in many ways threw a damper on what people were hoping for as far as their performance is going to be concerned, because he just provides that outlet for Russell Westbrook to be able to execute that pick and roll. And they were doing it really, really well in the portions that they had. And obviously Westbrook, having spent the vast majority of his career with a kind of big like Steven Adams, with the kind of big like Enes Kanter, like these kind of guys who just roll hard to the rim and go ahead and take the gravity that he brings and get the open buckets, that was obviously going to be a big loss. But for a guy like Daniel Gafford, who himself has had his own critics as far as his career is concerned, obviously has been in Chicago for the last 2 years since he went ahead and came there, hasn't had the kind of impact that may have otherwise been expected. In many ways, he was kind of stuck behind the likes of Lauri Markkanen, all these kind of guys that were there as stretch bigs for what Chicago wanted to do. But on the other hand, what Daniel Gafford brings is, despite being undersized, he has that incredible vision and timing, which is the biggest thing. Timing is everything when it comes to undersized bigs who are able to block the ball at a high level. And for Daniel Gafford, who isn't a big guy, like let's not throw that, he's 6'10", which for a center,
which is like pretty
purely center, that's
in this day and age,
6'10"
is pretty much your it's not traditional, but like 6'10" is still, I would say, a very normal height for a big these days.
It's normal, but the thing is, because he doesn't have that capability to stretch the floor in any ways, he was getting pushed out, and he's not a great defender in space. So what's ended up happening for the Washington Wizards is pretty much they're able to run it so that they have Westbrook and Beal kind of chasing guys around on the perimeter while allowing Daniel Gafford, like no matter what, stay on the inside. If there's bigs that are going ahead and stretching you out, we have guys who are able to be mobile enough to at least bother their shots. And Rui Hachimura, these kind of guys are mobile enough. And actually, I was going to say in Denny Avdia, who's now gone for the season, another one of those mobile wing guys who is able to stay forward. But as you said, Daniel Gafford is much like you have the Rudy Goberts of the world, much like you have these guys who are there purely to be able to clean up the mistakes that are going out there. And Daniel Gafford is doing that. So to the Washington Wizards' credit, they have unlocked that really well. They've obviously found that chemistry alongside the health that they've had. And much like, Realtor Fahad Rao is talking about what CP has been doing for the Phoenix Suns, which has been incredible. Westbrook is doing his own thing as well for the Washington Wizards, and both of those teams are absolute stories at this point in the season.
Yeah, and it's a great question. And if I was to answer that question, it's very hard to choose between the two because I think each story is so individually amazing. I don't want to choose who's the MVP between those two. So Chris Paul, last year you could even argue that he had a fantastic MVP-esque season because he turned it around for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Whereas, are you okay? Yeah, okay. Whereas the Westbrook situation is pretty interesting in itself because he's reviving a team that pretty much you felt like had nothing this season. So both stories are equally great. The Phoenix Suns, we're really excited to see what they do in the playoffs. We really want to see Booker in the playoffs. Finally,
yes, we do.
We're really excited for that. And big credit to Chris Paul for getting the team around. And if I was anyone in the playoffs, I would not want to face Phoenix. I really wouldn't because of just the experience and just the hype around it. Now, the inexperience, sure, you can talk about, but I don't want to get into that. But I just want to say with a mind like Chris Paul, changes the entire outlook and trajectory of teams. Now, I want to move on. We're talking about play-in here. Everything's so tight with both the East and the West, right? We could talk about the Raptors, but I want to talk about an even greater story right now. We had LeBron James quoted as saying, yes, Faraz, LeBron James, whoever created this play-in is just ridiculous. Like, this is the stupidest thing ever, right? And so Lakers are in a scary spot. They're still 4th or 5th in the West, I believe.
Sixth, man.
Sixth in the West, and literally 6 to 12. You're like, any one of those teams can move up and down. And then you talk about strength of schedule, but you also talk about injuries. Like, the Lakers have missed LeBron due to his ankle sprain, which he's usually a healthy guy, but that happened. AD with the Achilles injury, that happened, and then you have Scooter, who's always for some reason under COVID issues. So like, that's just tragic because then you have your second unit relied on so much. Yep. They pick up guys like Drummond, but we know who Drummond is. He's just there, to put it short, and they've seen it this season. But ultimately, they might miss out this year. So I know I don't think so, but do you?
No. The missing out scenario, there's just not enough games for them to do that. But the LeBron James question definitely has become top of mind as far as his health is concerned, and whether, frankly, the Lakers have enough time to be able to kind of get their cylinders firing. We all know once the playoffs come around, LeBron James turns into the king. He has his playoff mode. He's 0 dark 30.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to go ahead and absolutely show out. But the question really becomes, there's just been so many of these, I say, little stories out there. Dennis Schroeder's not really had the kind of impact that might have otherwise been expected from purely a actual value added to his play. He's getting stats. He's getting numbers out there. But it's just not getting them the kind of results that you might have otherwise expected. Last year around, these kind of questions were there for the LA Lakers as well. But once the playoffs came around, we saw that Rajon Rondo, KCP, all these guys that were there as the fringe guys really went ahead and stepped up in the postseason. And to me, that question mark has once again risen to an even greater degree this year because there is just so much more, I would say, strength in that top end of the West where people are like, okay, as you said, Phoenix 100% has been an absolutely incredible story this year. I do think Monty Williams is the coach of the year. I'm going to go ahead and agree with Fahad there. Hundo P, the Phoenix Suns have made that change. The Utah Jazz, who I, by the way, am still sticking with my finals pick this year. The Utah Jazz, I'm saying Utah's making it. I had Denver and Utah.
Jamal Murray's injury changed your mind.
Of course, Jamal Murray's injury is what changed it. So it's just like, man, I was between those two as being the two best teams that I'm seeing this year. And obviously the LA Clippers are one of those that are always there, but I just never will believe in them until they go ahead and actually prove it to me. But all those guys are legitimate noisemakers in the West. And where the Lakers could find themselves in trouble is the fact that they're only one game back of getting into that play-in scenario. And much as we said, where you would probably think that the Lakers are okay, but think about it. What if they end up in 7th seed, have to face off against the Golden State Warriors in one game and come up against a Steph Curry that's on absolute fire? So that becomes a game that could potentially be a loss for them. Then they're up against, I'm going to go right now, the Memphis Grizzlies and the San Antonio Spurs are the two teams that are at the bottom there. Maybe the Pelicans go ahead and make that noise and get into that spot. But regardless, all of those teams are young, fast-paced teams at this point that are there to gun, and they have been gunning at a high level from the outside over there. So it's just, I say, it's all this uncertainty that you don't want going into a title defense, especially because you're the champions. Everyone is out there to get you. You're the one that they got to beat. That's the whole idea, regardless of everything else. To be the best, you got to beat the best. And the Lakers have been far from at their best this season. So I said anything can happen in the playoffs, but Jekyll and Hyde performances could be a thing that are not only plaguing the LA Lakers, but plaguing some of the other potential big contenders as far as this entire postseason is going to be concerned.
You know, the funny thing about Brooklyn is you have elite players, right? But there's a lot of, like, you look at Kyrie's game, there's always been a lot of inconsistency, right? You're going to have games that you're going to win. You're going to have games that you're going to lose. Look at their record. Just look at their record, and that's all I got to say about that. You go into playoff time, these boys are going to ball out. Like, right now, I don't care what anyone says, Brooklyn is a cheat code. No matter what. You go into the playoffs, it's a cheat code. Kyrie can have 0 points that game. They're still going to find a way to win just because they have the beard. They have the beard. They have Kevin Durant. They have Joe Harris shooting lights out. They got Seth Green. That's like a layup for some people, right? Like, that's insanity. So, like, Brooklyn just has too much going on for them to, this whole Dr. Jekyll and, Mr. Hyde. So be it. Still a team that's winning at a high efficiency. And that's all we really got to say about that.
I mean, to me, it starts and ends with who is the facilitator of the ball. James Harden had come in and pretty much transformed how this Brooklyn Nets team had gone ahead and actually initiated their offense. All right, you talked about in the offseason or at the start of the season when these three guys came together, where is the sacrifice going to come from? Where is it going to be that person who goes ahead?
In a great way. It worked out for everyone.
That facilitator. But frankly, what Kevin Durant, what Kyrie are going to give you from a pure shooting percentage, from a pure shooting scenario, right? These are guys that have been made for the playoffs. Like Kyrie, even though I'm not the biggest fan of his game in terms of how effective that is as a point guard, how effective it is as a betterment of your team's offense. But if I'm looking for a guy to play one-on-one, a guy to get me a bucket, Kyrie is obviously near the top of that list. Yeah. So to me, it all comes back to health. Health is just, it's like a phrase for everyone in this season, but especially for a team like Brooklyn, where they have unlocked something in the depth of their team. You're seeing Jeff Green having a career season, pretty much the best season he's had since his OKC days. What's the kind of season you're seeing from Joe Harris? Like all these guys that are getting so many opportunities to be freed up, that kind of thing doesn't go away in the playoffs. That kind of thing only gets more and more magnified because everyone's going to be so keyed in on these stars. Yet Kevin Durant remains unguardable just purely from his height and his release perspective. James Harden, is going to be facilitating the ball and breaking defenses down. So Kyrie has the easiest job in the world. He pretty much has to do what he was doing for Cleveland back in 2015, 2016. Just worry about going to work against his one-on-one defender. So when it comes down to it, that is going to be a big, big thing. And I don't see a coaching change or trade or anything for them, at least not in this offseason. Perhaps you see a couple of things happening as far as, support pieces are concerned, but Blake Griffin has been doing quite well in a limited role for him, right? Yeah, in Detroit, he was pretty much required to be a star. He's not a star anymore. He's not going to be a main offensive focal point on your team, but he still has a motor. He still has the capability to kind of take off from time to time to put those highlights together and put those game-changing plays together.
And
So that's the kind of thing you get.
Yeah, and let's not forget he's an absolute shit disturber, if I can say that. Like no one likes to play against Blake because he elbows, he's a little bit dirty, but he also gets in your face, but in a way where he's the victim. You know what I mean? So that's going to be really annoying to play against in the playoffs, right? So, ultimately, coaching change, I don't think so. I think they have a perfect system for the players that they do have. The players themselves dictate the pace, which is amazing. No team can stop whatever the heck Brooklyn wants to do in terms of their offense. The only thing they can do is shoot themselves in the foot, right? That's the only explanation I would see for them to lose, around in the playoffs. But Brooklyn, man, I'm just excited to see what they do.
I'm excited with this postseason in general. Obviously, we're getting to the last 7-8 games. It's just seeding at this point. We've spoken about what the Raptors are doing. They're probably not going to be the ones to make it in. So now it's about really where it is that the new stars are going to be made, where it is that these guys that have been waiting for their opportunity to finally get through, break that ceiling. Jokic, who is the front runner for MVP this year, is 100% in my mind clinched it in the last stretch since Jamal Murray's been out. They've won 10 of their last 11 games. He's been an absolute monster. And he's obviously waiting again to go back into the playoffs and make that next push, because they had second round in the 2019 playoffs, had an absolute meltdown against the Portland Trail Blazers to get themselves eliminated there, where frankly they shouldn't have. Next year, go ahead and have an absolute Cinderella comeback season, and then go ahead and take out the LA Clippers, who themselves are obviously going to be incredibly hungry and ready to prove that they are not the second round chokers. Kawhi, who went ahead and moved over to the LA Clippers, he's not going to be satisfied with the performances that have happened. Paul George will 100% be looking to erase that pandemic piece stigma. There's just so many amazing stories that are going to be out in these playoffs.
Absolutely. And then you look at the standings right now, and I'm going to just go out and say, we have, imagine we have New York. The New York Knicks have made the playoffs. Imagine that, right? Just imagine that for a second.
And then you have their first plus 500 season after 8 years. Crazy.
8 years. How crazy is that? And then you talk about pretty much that Cinderella story of, the Charlotte Hornets even. We thought maybe, they may still have to do the play-in, but just them being in a playoff spot right now is insane. And it's LaMelo do what he's done. Gordon Hayward to do. Miles Bridges now, who's having a tear in the last 10 games. And so there's so many amazing stories, and there's a lot of great basketball to be played. And we want to know how you guys think in terms of the East and the West. So if you guys want, send us a DM, message us. Fahad, thank you so much for commenting and letting us, giving us some questions. And, we're giving you feedback of what we think. It's a great discussion between us. This is about basketball, baby. This is something we all love so much. So we want to hear from you guys. Who is your favorite Cinderella story, and who are your picks to go to the NBA Finals? Dude, the East, you have Philly, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, who are Miami, who are kind of those top tier teams, which you don't know. Any one of those four can go. But then you have teams like friggin' Boston that you're okay, they have the makeup. You never know, right? They have excellent coaching. And then you talk about the West, literally every team from 1 till 10, or maybe even 11 if we add New Orleans. All of those teams absolutely can, dominate. Every single one of them. Of course, you have your top tier teams, the Denver, Utah, Lakers, Clippers. But then you have Dallas.
Phoenix.
Right? Phoenix. Of course, Phoenix. You never really talk about it, but this season for sure, you have Phoenix. You have Portland, who's always done upsets. And you have Curry balling out at literally MVP caliber.
Yeah. If
So
the record was better, he would have had a legitimate shot at this year.
there's a
But
conversation there. But
Hundo
in any case, from a basketball standpoint, like watching Curry do Curry things again, it's spicy for us, baby. It's spicy Curry because we enjoy it. We enjoy it. That's what we've been brought up on, and that's how we like our Curry, baby. And just, it's exciting. So thank you once again for joining us on today's episode. The Raptors game starting in about 10 minutes, and so we're probably going to go get prepped for that. It was HK's birthday the other day, so definitely comment and wish him a happy birthday, and hopefully we'll get another birthday performance, because when they played, was it the Lakers that we played? Kyle Lowry 37 points and Pascal Siakam just went off, so we need another big performance this year to keep our playoff hopes alive. But yeah, definitely wish him a happy birthday. If you guys haven't checked out, Harris is working for one of those I believe sports fantasy companies, something like that. And he had his article published on Sunday. Definitely check it out. If you like what you see, be ready for this week's edition, because he will give you some preps for what may happen. If you want to kind of just talk about that really quickly.
Yeah, we can quickly go about it. So I took a position as the DFS analyst on Hoopball, which is an offshoot of Roto World, where they do all this daily fantasy picks. Focusing on DraftKings. So those who love playing daily fantasy tournaments, definitely check out Hoopball to go ahead and get the latest news, the latest picks, the latest injury info. And I said I post articles on there now once a week to be able to get my picks on a certain day on who the right value is, who the right studs are to be able to take it. So lots and lots of content coming your way, not only from The Swing, where we're here every Tuesday live on SportsTrends, but also through these different channels as well. As always, make sure to follow us on our Instagram page at The Swing Podcast, where we give the latest info of what's going on, our live reactions to what's going on in the basketball world, and just in general, having that impassioned basketball conversation with all of our followers and all of our fans. So
get that content from him early, people, before it gets big, and then he won't have that time anymore for you guys. So definitely go check that out. And then until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for another episode. Great episode. That's it from me. HK, you want to?
Absolutely. That's it here from The Swing Podcast. And we will see you next Tuesday right here on SportsTrends, right here on our YouTube channel. Follow us on all of our different media outlets, and we will see you at the next one. Take care. Peace.